They laughed when the waitress sat down at the billionaire's table. They didn't know they were laughing at a genius. Julian Thorne wasn't used to being challenged. He was the kind of man who treated the world like a chessboard. Every person a piece, every move his to command. Billionaire, investor, predator of markets. The kind of man people called visionary because they were too afraid to call him ruthless. The Grand Majestic Hotel was his favorite hunting ground. Polished marble floors, chandeliers that dripped with light, and people whose smiles were more expensive than truth. The kind of place where everyone pretended to belong, and everyone served someone richer than themselves. And somewhere between the glitter and the arrogance, Norah Vance carried a tray of champagne. Her uniform was clean, pressed, and invisible, like her. She moved like someone used to silence, used to being part of the background. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have seen it, the intelligence behind her eyes. The kind that couldn't be taught. No one did. Julian leaned back in his chair, laughing at something his associate said, the sound sharp and confident. He thrived on dominance, in the room, in business, in life. But beneath the layers of charm and confidence, there was something else, a man terrified of insignificance. When you live to win, the silence after victory is unbearable. He looked around for his next distraction. That's when he noticed her. Norah was placing a glass on the table beside him, her gaze briefly drawn to something in the corner, a chessboard. A beautiful old set, carved from ivory and oak, half covered in dust. Julian followed her eyes and smirked. "You play?" Norah froze. "A little," she said softly. He smiled, sensing weakness. "Then play me. I could use a challenge tonight." She hesitated. "I'm working, sir." "I'll pay you for your time," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Call it entertainment," the other guests chuckled. A waitress against a billionaire. A spectacle. Norah's manager tried to intervene. "Sir, that's really not appropriate." "Appropriate?" Julian interrupted, his voice smooth as glass. "I think it's perfectly appropriate to remind people of their place." Laughter echoed around the table. But Norah didn't laugh. She placed the tray down, her heartbeat steady, her hands calm. "All right," she said quietly. "One game." The crowd leaned in. Phones came out. The waitress versus the billionaire. A story waiting to trend. Julian gestured to the board like a king offering mercy. "You can be white," he said. "Ladies first." Norah sat down. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. She brushed her fingers against the worn edges of the board. The pieces felt familiar, like old friends she hadn't seen in years. Her mind flickered with memories, the sound of a clock ticking, her mentor's voice guiding her through endless tournaments, her little brother cheering from the stands, then the flashbulbs, the applause, and the silence that followed when it all disappeared. Julian moved first, pawn to e5, confident, predictable, lazy. Norah responded instantly, pawn to e4. "Classic opening," he said. "The best games start that way," she replied. Her voice was calm. But in her eyes there was focus, sharp, surgical, dangerous. Julian leaned forward, enjoying himself. "So tell me, Norah, do you know who I am?" "Someone who likes to win," she said without looking up. "I like people who understand hierarchy," he replied. "The strong lead. The weak follow?" "Maybe," she said. "But on this board everyone starts equal." He paused. For the first time that night, he didn't have a comeback. The first 10 moves passed in silence. Then 15. The crowd whispered, amused at first, then confused. Julian's confident smirk began to fade. Her moves weren't random. They were deliberate. Every pawn advance, every quiet capture. It was like she could see the future. "Interesting," he said. "You're not half bad." "Neither are you," she said, for someone who mistakes arrogance for skill. The air changed. Julian looked up, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "Your last move was sloppy," she said calmly, tapping a piece. "You sacrificed your knight for pressure you'll never get back. It's the kind of mistake made by someone who thinks intimidation is strategy." The table went silent. His associates exchanged uneasy glances. Julian chuckled, though it sounded forced. "You've got a mouth on you." "You told me to play," she replied. "I'm playing." He leaned back, trying to recover his composure. "You're lucky I'm being gentle." "I don't believe in luck," she said. "Only calculation." He moved again, aggressive, impulsive, emotional. She countered it like she'd been waiting for it all along. Piece by piece, she dismantled his position. He didn't realize it yet, but she was already controlling the game. Every move he made only tightened the trap. The crowd, once entertained, was now silent. Something extraordinary was happening, and they could feel it. Julian frowned, wiping his palm against his suit. For the first time in years, he was sweating. "You're good," he said under his breath. "You haven't seen good yet," she whispered. 5 more moves, and he saw it, the inevitable end. His king was cornered, his queen trapped, his pride bleeding. Norah made her final move, the soft click echoing like thunder. "Checkmate," she said. Silence. Julian stared at the board, unable to process what had just happened. A billionaire, beaten by a waitress, in front of his guests, his peers, his ego. Then, laughter. Not from him this time, but from the crowd. Nervous, disbelieving laughter. Julian forced a smile. "Beginner's luck," he said lightly. Norah stood up. "Luck doesn't last 15 moves," she said. "But arrogance does." She turned, picked up her tray, and walked away. The room watched her go, the girl who had done the unthinkable. Julian's smile faded as he looked back at the board. Every piece seemed to mock him, frozen mid-defeat. "Who is she?" he muttered. No one answered, but somewhere in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years began to stir. Curiosity. The kind that didn't let you sleep until you had answers. He thought he'd taught a waitress her place. He didn't know he'd just played the first move in a game that would change his life forever. Julian Thorne didn't sleep that night. The sound of that single word, checkmate, kept echoing in his head, over and over, like a ghost refusing to leave. He stared at the ceiling of his penthouse, city lights spilling through the glass walls, reflecting off a half-finished glass of whiskey. He'd lost before in markets, in negotiations, in politics, but never like that. Never publicly. Never to someone who carried a tray for a living. By dawn, his curiosity had become an obsession. "Find out who she is," he ordered his assistant, pacing across the room. "The waitress from the Grand Majestic. Everything. Her name, where she lives, her background." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, may I ask why?" Julian's expression was cold, unreadable. "Because no one humiliates me in my own game, and no one walks away without a rematch." Norah Vance, meanwhile, woke up in her tiny apartment on the east side of the city. One room, cracked walls, and the sound of trains outside. Her life hadn't changed much since last night, except for one thing. For the first time in years, she felt alive. When she looked at the mirror that morning, she saw more than just a tired waitress. She saw the girl she used to be, the chess prodigy who once dreamed of a grandmaster title. But that dream had burned down years ago, with her father's death and the debt that followed. Tournaments became impossible. Teaching jobs vanished. Survival became her new strategy. Now she spent her days serving the kind of people she used to beat in competitions, until last night, when life gave her one move back. At 9 a.m., Julian's assistant returned with a file. He placed it on the desk silently. Julian flipped it open. His smirk faded almost instantly. Name? Norah Vance, age 26, former national junior chess. Champion world ranking, age 16, number 7. Female division. Last tournament canceled. Financial withdrawal. The attached photo showed a younger Norah holding a trophy, smiling beside a man who looked proud enough to move mountains. Her father. Julian leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo. She was a prodigy. Yes, sir. Some called her the next Judith Polgar. But her career disappeared after her father's death. She's been working odd jobs since. Julian tapped the photo. No wonder she beat me, he smiled. Not the arrogant grin of a winner, but the fascinated grin of a hunter who'd found his worthy prey. Set up a rematch, he said quietly. How, sir? I'll handle it myself. That evening, Norah returned to the restaurant for her next shift. But the air felt different, heavier, charged. Her co-workers whispered as she walked by. Then she saw why. At the center of the dining hall, under a chandelier, sat a brand-new chessboard, marble and onyx, custom-made, and beside it stood Julian Thorne himself. He turned as she entered, smiling like a man who'd been waiting all day. Miss Vance, he said smoothly, I thought you might join me again, call it a continuation. I'm working, she said flatly. Not tonight. I bought out the restaurant for 2 hours, she blinked. You what? Everyone's paid for the evening. It's just you and me, he gestured toward the board. One more game, double or nothing. Nothing's on the table, she said. Then I'll raise the stakes, he replied. If you win, I'll fund your return to the professional circuit. Full sponsorship, travel, everything. The room went silent again. Norah looked at him, searching for the trick. And if you win? You work for me, he said. As my personal strategy consultant, her eyes narrowed. You want to own me? I want to understand you, he said softly. You fascinate me. It was arrogance and admiration tangled together, the kind of dangerous mix that starts wars. She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she sat down. White or black? You choose, he said. Black, she replied. This time you start, he smiled, impressed. Confident. Prepared, she corrected. The game began. Julian had studied for this. Every book, every video, every master's opening, he'd rehearsed it all. But Norah played differently this time. Colder, sharper. Every move was a message. Julian realized it halfway through. She wasn't playing to win. She was playing to teach. You're hesitating, she said at one point. No, he replied, forcing a smile. Just thinking. That's the same thing. Her voice cut through him. Because she was right, he prided himself on control, but tonight she had all of it. She read him like a book, anticipated every move before he made it. The tension in the room thickened. The staff had stopped pretending to work. They were all watching, breath held. Halfway through the match, Norah paused. You think chess is about domination, she said quietly. It's not. Then what is it about, he asked. Survival, discipline, patience, knowing when to sacrifice what you love most to protect what matters more. Her words hit deeper than she realized. Julian flinched. Because those were the same lessons he'd never learned. He made one aggressive move too many. And that was it. Norah's counterattack was ruthless, elegant, final. Checkmate, she whispered again. Julian stared at the board. And for the first time he didn't feel humiliated. He felt alive. How did you learn to see like that? He asked softly. She smiled faintly. You don't learn it. You live it. He leaned back, exhaling. Then teach me. She froze. What? I don't want to own you, Norah. I want to learn from you. Help me understand what I keep missing. There was a long silence between them, a tension that wasn't rivalry anymore. It was respect. Something fragile, something new. Then she stood up. You're not ready, she said, turning away. For what? For the truth. And she walked off again, leaving him with more questions than answers. Julian looked down at the board and the battlefield that kept humbling him. For the first time in his life, he didn't see pieces. He saw patterns, and somewhere in the middle of them, he saw her. He thought he wanted revenge, but what he really wanted was redemption. The city never really slept, but for Julian Thorne, sleep had become a stranger. It had been 3 weeks since his second defeat to Norah Vance. 3 weeks since he realized money couldn't buy mastery, or peace. Every night, he replayed that match in his mind. Every word she'd said echoed through him like a riddle he couldn't solve. You don't learn it, you live it. He wasn't sure which haunted him more, her brilliance or the look in her eyes when she said it, so he did what billionaires always do when they don't understand something. He searched for it. He studied it. He tried to own it. Julian started attending chess clubs in secret, quiet places filled with old men and bored teenagers. No cameras, no luxury. Just the sound of clocks ticking and minds colliding. He learned how to lose again and again until the arrogance began to melt away, replaced by something unfamiliar. Humility. But humility, like skill, had a price, and he was only beginning to pay it. Meanwhile, Norah's life hadn't changed much, at least not on the outside. She still worked double shifts, still paid rent late, still skipped dinner some nights, but her quiet world had started to shake. It began with a phone call from the National Chess Federation, a voice she hadn't heard in years. Oh, Norah Vance? We've received an anonymous sponsorship request for your reinstatement. Full coverage. All fees paid, her breath caught. From who? The donor wishes to remain private. She didn't have to guess. She knew Julian Thorne, the same man she'd humiliated twice, was now paying for her to rise again. At first, she refused. Pride wouldn't let her accept it. But then she thought of her father, how he'd spent his last years trying to keep her dream alive, selling everything he owned so she could compete. She realized this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about finishing what she started. So she said yes. 2 weeks later, she stood in a hotel ballroom, not as a waitress this time, but as a competitor. The board was the same, but everything else was different. The crowd, the spotlight, the silence before the first move. All of it brought back the ghost of who she'd been, and somewhere in the back of that room, sitting quietly in a tailored suit, was Julian. No entourage, no arrogance, just him watching. Their eyes met for a moment. He gave a slight nod, almost like asking permission to be proud of her. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. The match began. Norah was flawless, precise, calm, dangerous. Her opponent, a national seed, tried to outmaneuver her, but she dismantled his defense with elegance that drew murmurs from the crowd. Then, halfway through the game, she froze, because for the first time in years, she remembered what winning had cost her. Her father's voice echoed from memory. You have the gift, Norah, but never forget, genius can be a lonely place. She pushed the thought away and focused, but something inside her cracked. When she finally won, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt empty. The applause sounded distant. Later that night, as she stepped outside into the rain, Julian was waiting under an umbrella. Congratulations, he said softly. She looked at him, tired, drenched, hollow. You shouldn't have done this. Why not? Because I didn't ask you to. I didn't do it for you, he said. I did it for me, she frowned. I needed to understand why you play, he said. Why you keep walking into a world that keeps breaking you. Her voice trembled slightly. You think you can understand that from the sidelines? No, he said. That's why I'm asking you to teach me, she laughed bitterly. You're used to buying everything you want, aren't you? Not anymore. There was something raw in his voice. Something human. Norah studied him, searching for the arrogance she'd hated before. It wasn't there. For the first time, she saw a man trying to change. Fine, she said at last. You want to learn chess. Then you start from the beginning. No ego. No shortcuts? Deal. And if I ever think you're not serious, she added, I walk away. Understood. That night, under the streetlight, an unlikely alliance began. Over the next few weeks, Norah trained him relentlessly. Mornings began with puzzles. Afternoons were spent replaying old grandmaster matches. Evenings were long, silent games where neither spoke a word. Julian learned fast, but more than moves, he learned discipline. He began showing up early, listening instead of talking, losing without complaint. And in that quiet routine, something strange began to grow. Not romance, not yet, but respect. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not the way men looked at women, but the way students look at teachers who changed their lives. And sometimes, when he made a clever move, she'd allow herself a small smile. They never spoke of it. They didn't have to. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Julian asked, Why did you quit chess? She hesitated. Then, quietly, Because I stopped believing I was playing for something real. What do you mean? Chess took everything from me, she said. My time, my father, my peace. When he died, I realized I'd spent my life chasing trophies instead of moments. He nodded slowly. I know what that feels like. You don't, she said. But there was no anger, just sadness. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to win everything and still feel like you've lost. Their eyes met. Two different worlds, one same emptiness. Maybe, she said, we're both just trying to prove we can be more than what broke us. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside filled the silence. Days turned into weeks. And for the first time in a long time, both of them started to change, not because of each other, but through each other. Norah began smiling again, remembering why she'd loved chess before the pain. Julian stopped chasing wins and started chasing meaning, but the world they were building was fragile, and fate wasn't done testing them, because soon the truth about Norah's anonymous sponsorship would leak. And when it did, the same world that cheered her comeback would turn on her, calling her a fraud, a bought prodigy, a puppet of the billionaire who wanted to own her legacy. The headlines would break everything they'd rebuilt. And this time, it wouldn't just be her reputation at stake, it would be her heart. They played for mastery once. Now they'd have to fight for truth and for each other. The morning it happened, Norah woke up to the sound of her phone vibrating non-stop. At first, she thought it was another tournament update. Then, she saw the headlines. Billionaire sponsors Waitress's chess comeback. Secret affair or publicity stunt? Norah Vance's wins funded by Julian Thorne's money. The genius who sold her soul. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. Photo after photo of her and Julian outside the club and cafes during training sessions, each one twisted into a story that wasn't true. The comments were worse. Of course she's winning. He bought her opponents. So much for being a prodigy. Chess queen or chess con artist. By noon, her phone was flooded with hate. Her sponsorship was suspended pending investigation. Her upcoming match was canceled. Her reputation gone overnight. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, tears burning behind her eyes. It felt like déjà vu, losing everything again. And this time, it wasn't just the world's cruelty. It was his kindness that had destroyed her. Julian read the news from his office. Every word hit him like a blade. He'd meant to help her. He'd wanted to give her back what life stole. But instead his name had poisoned hers. He called her again and again. No answer. By evening, he drove to her apartment in the rain. When she opened the door, her eyes were red, her face cold. You did this, she said. Norah, listen to me. No, You don't get to talk your way out of this one. I told you not to interfere? I didn't leak anything, he said. Someone in my company must have... Your company, your world, your money. It's all the same thing. Her voice cracked. You don't understand what this means for me. I worked my whole life for a second chance. And now they think I'm your project. He stepped closer. You're not my project. Then what am I, Julian? Silence. He didn't have an answer. Not one that wouldn't hurt her more. She shook her head, backing away. You can't fix this. Not with money, not with words. The world sees me as a fraud now, and I can't play anymore. It's over. Then I'll make them see the truth, he said quietly. She looked at him. Broken, tired, almost pitying. You can't control truth, Julian. You can only live it. And she closed the door. For the first time in his life, Julian Thorne didn't fight back. He didn't call lawyers. He didn't issue statements. He disappeared. He shut down meetings, canceled appearances, locked himself in his penthouse, surrounded by silence. Because for once, the man who had everything realized he had nothing that mattered. Weeks passed. Then months. Norah tried to move on. She returned to small teaching jobs, local chess clubs, anything that helped her survive. But everywhere she went, the whispers followed. That's her, the billionaire's girl. Still, she taught. Still, she played. Because deep down, she knew what her father once told her. The board doesn't care what they say. It only knows the truth. And one night, that truth came knocking again. It was during a small charity event downtown. A chess fundraiser for underprivileged kids. Norah had reluctantly agreed to play an exhibition match, more out of obligation than hope. The hall was half empty, filled with volunteers and children. The board was simple, wooden, worn from years of use. Then she heard a familiar voice behind her. Still favoring the Sicilian defense, I see, she turned. Julian stood there, no suit, no cameras, no entourage, just a man with tired eyes and a folded umbrella. What are you doing here? She asked softly. Playing, he said. He sat down across from her. The crowd murmured. They recognized him, of course, but the two ignored them. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who'd hurt and healed each other in ways neither planned. One last game, he said. No press, no stakes. Just truth. She hesitated, then nodded. The match began. It wasn't like the others. No tension. No need to prove anything. Just two souls speaking the only language they both understood. Pawn to e4. Pawn to c5. Her fingers moved with quiet grace. His with newfound patience. They played in silence for nearly an hour. No arrogance, no fear, only respect. At one point, Norah smiled faintly. You've improved. You taught me, he said, to stop playing for victory and start playing for understanding. The crowd had fallen completely silent. Even the children sensed it, that this wasn't about chess anymore. It was about forgiveness. Move after move, the board filled with the rhythm of closure. Then, at last, Norah saw it. A checkmate, waiting in 3 moves. She looked up at him. He already knew. You could stop it, she said gently. I don't want to, he replied. Sometimes losing is the only way to win. She made her final move, soft, deliberate, graceful. Checkmate! And this time, neither of them looked at the board. Julian smiled. That's 3 times now. Norah's eyes softened. It was never about the score. He stood, extending his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Thank you, he said. For what? For reminding me that genius isn't something you conquer. It's something you learn from, she smiled faintly. And you reminded me that not every gift ruins the giver. They stood there a moment longer. 2 players. 1 game, 1,000 lessons. The crowd erupted into applause, not for the winner, but for what they'd witnessed. 2 people finding peace over 64 squares. Months later, Norah would quietly return to the professional circuit, not with sponsors, but with integrity. And Julian Thorne would become her silent supporter from afar, never claiming credit, never seeking spotlight, just cheering from the shadows like a man finally content to let someone else win. One journalist later asked Norah about that infamous night, the first time she beat the billionaire. She smiled and said, he thought he was playing chess. I was teaching him life. He invited a waitress to play for fun. She taught him everything he didn't know about life, loss, and genius.